Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Today we have a great guest. We have Mark Campbell, the CTO of Replicated. Before we start into the webinar, though, a couple of housekeeping items. We have real-time closed captioning on this webinar. You can click on that button where that big red arrow is if you want to activate that. Also, if you look at the right side of the screen, you will see there's a section for Q&A and another for polls. If you have any questions, you want us to bring up any topics around the whole build versus buy theme, please put them there. We will read them at the end. And also keep an eye on the polls section. We'll be releasing some polls to the conversation just to get a sense of how you think about this. What are the challenges you're running into? And yeah, please enjoy the webinar. And well, Mark, welcome. Mark is the CTO of Replicated. Replicated is a company where they enable cloud-native software vendors like HashiCorp, Puppet, Harness, and many others to operationalize and scale the distribution of their modern on-prem software. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Very excited to have you here. I've been listening to your podcast for years, so it's cool to see you in person.
Yeah, Ramiro, thanks. Happy to be here.
So what brings us today is the topic of build versus buy. This is a topic that you and Replicated have faced as a company, as engineering leader for a long time. And I know that when you were starting to engage with us, you mentioned a lot of the really interesting reasons why you decided to buy versus build. So I would like to get deeper into that today. But before we had the conversation, just to set the context, I've been in developer tools for years, and build versus buy is a constant conversation around pretty much everything. Way back in terms of like virtualization, even data centers, cloud, containers, Kubernetes, whatnot. There's always this discussion of should we build, should we buy? In our world of cloud dev environments, this is becoming a more important topic because cloud dev environments sit very close to the customers. It's something they're going to be using every day. So they're always wondering, should we build or should we buy? It's something that we as an organization want to help our customers answer this. So in order to do that, we started by setting up this online guide. We have this self-evaluation page on our website that gives you some information on build versus buy. And there we talk about 4 pillars that you have to consider when building versus buying. One is features. Are you going to be able to build the same feature set that a vendor provides? Are you going to be able to be up to date as your requirements change? We also talk about maintenance. Are you going to be able to staff your team properly so that not only can you build your platform, can you keep it running over the years? Are you going to have enough resources? Are you going to be able to keep expanding that as the demand for it grows? And finally, we also talk about ROI, which is it worth it? Are you going to be able to get the benefits back to you with all the people you need to hire? So these are topics that we've discussed with many customers. Sure, Mark, you've also discussed with yours, given the nature of Replicated. And that's what I wanted to talk about here today. So, just to kind of get the conversation started, Mark, why don't we start by sharing a bit of why you decided to buy your cloud environment platform rather than building it?
Yeah. I think you're right with those different topics. Those are like, they all came into the conversation for us, and, in full context, like we didn't go from nothing to switching to like adopting Octeto. We actually did have a couple instances in the previous iterations of our cloud native dev environment that we had built ourselves and we're operating, and running into some challenges that I think we'll dig into as we go. A lot of them really just around the effort that we were putting into maintaining it when it was a critical component that we needed, right? Like all of our engineers, we want something that works and they can iterate and they can ship really quickly. They shouldn't be getting in their way. But it's also not differentiating. It's like time spent doing that isn't time spent building our own product and building our own functionality and solving the product that like the shipping the stuff that we need to for our customers. It's enabling our team to do that. So it's critical to do, and it became a challenge for us as we were scaling the engineering team to be able to do it at scale and reliably and make sure that it was meeting every engineer's needs.
Yeah, that's super interesting because one of the things that when we started talking about build versus buy and about the needs of your team is you have a very technical team. Like there's no question that hey, you can build a platform and you can build everything it needs. And then you kind of started talking about maintenance cost, the priority, like is this what your company should be focusing on? Will this make the differentiation that you need for your business to succeed? Was there a point, as because developers like to build, builders build, and we all there's this huge
Yep.
temptation. I've done it, and maybe you've done it too. Like you start building a script, and then it kind of turns into a platform, and then you're kind of owning this at night, whatever. Was there ever a point, like a clear point, like, hey, this is a problem that, as the city of the company, needs to be solved? Was it like a tipping point? Is it more of a things you were noticing? Like you can walk us through your thought process of like, okay, we need to find something. This is a problem now. Like
Yeah.
how you got there?
Yeah, I think that there were a couple of things that kind of came together. One, like you mentioned, we have a really technical team. We're shipping a product. Part of our product is a Kubernetes distribution. So, we have our core team of engineers that, initially we were relatively small and there was a lot of very deep infrastructure experience there. And so, sure, to your point, we're going to skew a little bit towards build because, hey, like we can do it, let's just do it. And then I think we started seeing a problem around our specific implementation that we had where we would hire, not everybody was like a Kubernetes expert. Not every engineer on the team had deep Kubernetes expertise. And, we had, we wanted to hire folks with really good specialties, maybe like a good front end engineer or a good, engineer who knows how to work in this stack or this particular language, this framework, doesn't really know Kubernetes. And the kind of the onboarding cost and the overhead of keeping them successful was a little bit difficult. And this was before we actually had a dedicated platform team. So we like there were a lot of different reasons, but I think kind of that tipping point was when we realized like, you know, wow, if we actually sit down and we calculate how much time we're spending fighting all of the different environments, troubleshooting these ad hoc one-off scenarios by SSHing in or remote like controlling a developer's machine to get them back and successful, and how many hours did we just lose in productivity for that one engineer, it was adding up to a significant amount. And then there was no scale that was really going to happen the way that we were building it. Like as we grew the team and added more engineers, that problem grew. I mean, like probably linearly. We didn't anticipate it getting any better, so that's when we started looking.
Interesting. So for you, is this? I would like to ask this question of like, hey, now, with all that right, going back, do you think this is something that a team needs to solve immediately? Hey, before you think about it, just use a platform. Is this something that is more of a problem once you grow? Like something we hear a lot about is kind of this transition that you kind of mentioned, which is you go from this initial engineering team, generalists in both your companies and ours, Kubernetes heavy, infra people build these things. As you start to hire front end or other functions, it feels like that is a tipping point. You think that is when companies need to start thinking about this build versus buy, or we should do it from the very beginning? As someone who went through this journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question, and I think the challenge with waiting, and I mean, this is a conversations that we had internally as we were starting to scale out the team was, we wanted to hire these, engineers who didn't have the Kubernetes expertise, but we were worried about whether we were going to be setting them up for success. And so it almost became a gating function where we as an engineering org said, we want to hire more engineers. We want to hire some specialty engineers who don't have this exact same knowledge set that every other engineer on the team does. But hold on, before we do this, we have to transition our dev environment. We have to make sure that we're setting them up to be successful. So I would say like, sure, like our team was initially very successful building on their own. We didn't like the team was good, but it actually did cause us to probably put off some hires and put off some scale because we knew that we weren't going to have them successful. Or maybe like some of the engineers that we brought in during this transition took longer to onboard and than they should have, because we were kind of paralleling the two tasks of transitioning to an environment that's compatible with the way that they can work while also like trying to get them successful on day one.
That's super interesting. That is a topic that we saw something very similar with Octero as we transition and initially we had these expectations and naively that we'll hire good engineers and everybody can pick up all these skills, and it's true
Mm-hmm.
if they have enough time and focus. But then we kind of realize what you said. Hey, we're hiring all these people who are experts on UX, they're experts on all these other tasks, and you have them learning all these Kubernetes infra rules just to kind of keep their environment running. And that's when for us was very clear, and that's the kind of same transition we've seen for our customers.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I think this topic of all this cognitive weight we put on developers is now it's becoming more of a topic, but for the longest time it was kind of ignored. So I always really like how you talk a lot about this extra cost, how you set them up for success. Is this like, how do you measure the ROI of this? Have you ever thought about like, okay, I want to hire this person, I want to set up for success, which means I have to invest on platform, tooling, buying dev environments, maybe even other things. How do you make that calculation? Do
Yeah.
you have like an internal, is it any tangible way, or more like as you know your team, you kind of realize, hey, this is important now?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. I think there's a lot there. But I think the kind of the subjective answer to that is just like overall, like, is the team happy, or are they like complaining about like the tools that they have to do their job every day? Like that matters honestly more than anything. I could have data that shows, oh, you're up and running 98% of the time as a team, and like this is a really successful platform, but like they don't like it, it doesn't matter, right? Like, and the same is true the other way. And we actually did look at like everything, and we can dig into that, but like we looked at the cost of running the other system, from like the infrastructure costs. Our dev environment had grown too big for everybody to run it on their laptop. It was too complicated. And so we can look at the cost of that. But I think it really it does come down to like uptime and like developer, being productive. They're not fighting, like disk space usage, or, oh, I got to upgrade my special Kubernetes cluster that I'm running, and Docker and Containerd, all this. We also did grow and have a dedicated platform team. And that kind of enabled us to have the scale where a dedicated platform team is not super effective when they're managing, 20 or 30 or 40 different engineers, like ad hoc Snowflake bespoke setups that they're using to build on. When we have that centralized platform that the platform team manages, then like they can actually get better statistics, better data, better, they know whether it's working, and also they have more controls to keep it working and updating with a lot less work.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's something that we've been also talking with other people in the space. Is developer happiness matters a lot as part of the ROI.
Yeah,
and I think you're right that it's really hard to measure, like, because this, call them paper cuts, and it's like, all these paper cuts, like in your process, they matter a lot, because it's like if writing code is not joyful, if it's not like all this friction is not taken care of, people get grumpy, then the whole team loses morale, and they're not as effective. And that is something that we bring up a lot in these ROI conversations. That it's not just there's an easy-ish calculation of how many, like, if I need to build this platform, I need to hire 10 people. If I buy it, only 2. And that's one aspect of it, right? And it matters a lot in terms of like payroll, salaries, cost control. But then there's this other thing, which is, hey, are we going to have a happy team? Are they going to be effective? One of the topics that we touch on in our self-guided guide, in our guide around build versus buy, is about keeping up with features. When you build your platform, you build it for like the use case you have that day. And as the needs grow, as you mentioned, as you go from local to remote, to standardizing on Kubernetes versions, on other aspects, a lot of people talk about the challenge that is, hey, keeping up with these features. Like, nobody wants to build all these like quote unquote boring features around scale, performance, availability, compliance when it comes time. Have you seen this like in your efforts? Do you agree or with this topic? Like, do you believe this matters when you made this calculation?
Yeah, I think it does. I look at it, as less, about what features have I not thought about that I might want? But like really when you're choosing to buy and there's other customers, right? You're buying into an ecosystem and a platform that has, reasonable adoption, then it's unlikely that when I go to you, Ramiro, and I'm like, oh, our team ran into this problem, you're going to be like, well, that's the first we've ever heard of that. Like you've probably heard of that and had that feedback from other customers because we're just building on Kubernetes. Everybody's going to have similar problems. And so there's a higher likelihood that like, it's either something that you're aware of, you can help us out with, or even something that like, or possibly just something that's on the roadmap and like and you're working on it, and like we can be one more voice there. But really it comes down to oh well, what now, today what we really care about for an example might be for our compliance purposes, we need to do some better provenance checking for our developer environments. Great. Like you may have functionality around that like our team, if we on our build, we would have to totally do it ourselves, like just because you have other customers who have already asked you those questions before.
Yeah, that to me, because we have the same challenges. We also buy things from other vendors. That aspect of something like each of us sit at the center of kind of this hub spoke model of like, I talk to a lot of customers around dev experience, probably more than most. You talk to customers a lot about enterprise installation setup than most. So everything that we use, we will benefit from all these other conversations. To me, it's a very powerful thing. I think it's something that it allows us to build a more robust product, a platform that then everybody else can benefit from. But when we talk about these topics, for some CTOs, some decision makers, there's this concern of like, well, but if the roadmap doesn't go in the direction I want, I'm kind of gonna get stuck here. Have you felt this? Not just upset, but overall, as you buy rather than build. Is this a valid concern in your opinion?
I think it's a risk, obviously, right? Like the risk is, we're buying into this, and the roadmap. To exactly what you said. The roadmap may choose to either like not prioritize functionality that we're looking for, or just go a completely different direction. I think that's important up front to look at it. We like, to your point, we do the same thing at Replicated, right? We are, it's a buy versus build decision, how you want to ship your enterprise software. So we have these conversations there too. And I think it's just make sure, you're aligned on like what the problem set is you're trying to solve, and less about the specific features and functionality that you're building. Like we are a team of engineers pretty committed to building in the cloud native ecosystem. I mean, Kubernetes is core to what we're building. And so, knowing that you're solving this at a Kubernetes level gives us confidence that like, sure, it's not going to be 100% like alignment on every feature and every functionality in implementation, but like, we're not going to be asking for, hopefully, we have high confidence we're not going to be asking for stuff completely out of left field. I mean, like that's just, understanding the overall direction.
And is that how you de-risk this as you go through vendors? Like I think in our case, when you're thinking of Kubernetes, very aligned. And I'm asking because this comes a lot, like cloud dev environments, and I'm assuming you probably have the same challenge with your product. They sit very close to the developer. They sit very close to the product.
Yeah.
It's something that we're seeing with our customers when they're successful. I mean, the value of like not having to run things on your laptop, to not have to run out of like disk and CPU, is very clear, quick enough. So when we see this kind of successful customers, they adopt it and they just don't want to go back, which puts you in a risk situation that if things don't work out, then you have to trust the vendor. Besides what you said, are there any other things that you use to kind of de-risk these decisions?
Yeah,
especially those that require a big investment. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good question. I think the other thing that we do is, it's we just make sure that we understand the product architecture enough to know like if there are, because some products are built without them, but like good escape hatches where we can actually build, like maybe we don't want to build our entire system that around our cloud native dev environments or how we're shipping enterprise software, whatever the problem is, but as long as we can like where something doesn't align or there's a gap, we can actually build and like complement the functionality of the platform that we're buying. knowing that that option is available. It's not like a tightly, closed system that like if it doesn't do exactly what we want, we can't even use the entire thing. But like it's composable in some ways. Like we can like integrate into it. Like that gives us like it removes a lot of the risk in the decision, just knowing like we actually do have a team of engineers, and if we have to go like build that, it might change the value proposition. That's a different conversation that we should definitely have at that point, but it doesn't remove the value proposition.
That's really interesting. Now taking it in a bit of a different conversation, because it's something else that I've heard from conversation with other people, and I would like to kind of hear your thoughts on this. In my opinion, one of the biggest risks of building an internal platform, especially for dev environments, is that it typically falls into one or two people. And these internal efforts tend to be kind of almost like guerrilla. You build them on your spare time. There's not a lot of maintenance. So there's a big risk that when this person leaves or they get reassigned to a different team, you're kind of left empty-handed. For us, as we talk to our customers, we always mention, hey, this is one of the biggest risks. Like with Octeto, you have a vendor, there's dedicated support, there's a company behind it that's all they do, that's all we do. But some companies, they're okay. What's your take on this? Like, you think that this risk of somebody leaving, is that something that people need to think about? Is that high on your list of concerns, or is more of a, yeah, sure, but not the most important thing?
Yeah, no, I think it is actually one of the most important things. I think it's the opposite before. We were talking about de-risking the specific implementation decisions that a vendor may choose, but I think you should also consider the risk of buy, and that risk really does come down to exactly what you said. We put an engineer on it, and like maybe it's not a spare time project. Maybe we actually hire one full-time engineer, and he's building this. He or she is building this platform for us. There is a huge risk that there's a lot of institutional, non-shared across the entire organization knowledge there, and that engineer leaves one day, and we now have no operational expertise in it, and now what we have is a legacy system that nobody is familiar with, and we have to figure out how to maintain, and it puts us in a way worse place. I think the partnering with and choosing to buy a platform that has like some longevity to it, knowing that like our team and your team can transition and change over time, but like the platform will continue, like the contract that we have, like the API contract, like the existence of the platform is going to continue to work week to week, regardless of whether you're there, I'm here, the specific people are there. Like I think is a huge de-risking reason to choose to buy versus build.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's I like the way you phrase like this API contract between the companies. Like you're going beyond the, like, I might go on a vacation for a couple of weeks, and if your company has an issue, it doesn't matter. Like somebody will be there.
Right. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that, right? If you have one dedicated person like working on that platform, yeah, we talked about them leaving and that kind of existential threat to the platform that they built, but they probably do want to take vacation during some time too. And you do like, it's really hard to put a large enough team on a platform, on something that you're building yourself, that can completely offset that justification to buy versus build.
Why is that hard? Is it because, I mean, at the end of the day, that is not the goal of your company, and that's what it makes it hard for you? Is it a matter of like resources, just not having enough people in the team? What do you think drives this?
I mean, I think it's both of those. I think, generally, especially when you get back to the earlier conversation, you start looking at the ROI, when you actually think about how do I put together a team that's large enough to kind of think about that longevity, the operational success, and making sure the platform lasts long enough. It's that's probably going to skew that ROI calculation to be, you should buy versus build. Like any kind of thought about saving money because you could do it with one or two engineers is like it becomes very, very hard to justify that when you start thinking about like the long-term maintenance of it. I think that's it. I mean, it's not like the technical expertise at all. I think Ramiro, I would guess that a lot of Octeto customers are pretty strong, like Kubernetes experts. They're developers. You're selling to developers who know how to write code, and like you can access Kubernetes, you understand that infrastructure. So it's not solving a problem that they didn't have the technical capability to solve. It's really just de-risking that like problem so that they can, they don't have to go assemble a team that's large enough to know that it's going to last. It's going to be there to support their needs moving forward.
That is a really good point. That's something that as we engage with more customers and prospects, changing the conversation from you can't build this to you could build it if you wanted, but is this really what you want to use your resources for, has been very helpful, more than for us, for our customers, as a way to unlock this kind of train of thought of like, it's no longer about, sometimes you tell to a leader, no, like we don't do that, but I'm going to go to extreme, right? You tell them, no, like we're much better on this than you should trust us. And then they're like, well, no. And it's right. Like, you have like great technical talent, your staff, pretty much, as you said, all of our customers have people that can build Octeto, and it will take them about the same time it took us, which is multiple years, by the way. But I find that changing that conversation towards, and you kind of keep going back to it, and I agree, the cost, the opportunity cost, maintenance, it's not about the skills, it's about where you put your resources. I think it's very interesting, and it's something that I haven't seen discussed that much overall when other companies talk about build versus buy. I think people focus a lot on the raw numbers of like, you're going to save this many developers, which I get it. It's an easy calculation, but it's a topic that I'm becoming very passionate about discussing. Really, what is the focus of your company?
Yeah. I think there's also, the part that we didn't talk about in there is just the overall time to market too, right? Like when we talk about risk, I can put together a team and we can build something. It's going to take some time. So like we don't have like a solution during the time that they're building that, but there's also the risk that it just doesn't work out, or it didn't actually meet the needs, or the needs changed while that team was building it. So like the time to getting that solution in place when you buy is obviously, like it's going to be shorter. We do the same, right? We like at Replicated, we're selling to like very technical groups who, honestly, not only could build their own enterprise distribution, a lot of them have built their own enterprise distribution. And we actually see a lot of success. I don't know if you see this too, but we see a lot of success with folks who have built it themselves and just like starting to scale and starting to run, like say like, great, we've outgrown the solution that we built. And now it's time to really think about like, like the solution that a team of engineers has spent years and years building. And, how do we leverage that now?
Oh, no, 100%. It's funny because that, at the beginning of the company, we saw that a lot. People who will come talk to us, and then they'll be like, you know what? I get what you're doing, but I think it's better if we build it. And they'll go.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year later, we had like a non-trivial amount of customers that a year later came back, say, okay, yep, we built something. And exactly what you said. It took us a year. We spent, I don't know, $1 million in payroll because we had to hire 5 people, staff a team for a year. We're 80% there. We're still missing the other 80%, that's all joke. And we can't wait. It's like, can we talk again? Now that we understand the problem better, we understand the solution. That was one of the main motivations for us on building this guide and creating these resources, is how can we help, this leadership? Can we save them that year? Like, right. And for some companies, they have to go through that because they need to understand the problem and their needs. But one of our goals with this was kind of, hey, let's try to, again, share the knowledge that we've learned from all of these customers, create some assets, put them out there, and make them, I hope, in a way that it's helpful for customers to understand when is correct. Because I do believe there's a time when you need to build.
Yeah.
It depends on the company, your needs, how this fits with everything that you're doing. But yeah, we saw that a lot. And that was very interesting. Like, I learned a lot. I'm like, okay, you ship something, it kind of works, but now you need it more than ever. And that's another topic I want to talk to you about is how much you value things like a support team behind, a dedicated team. Like, we guarantee certain SLAs in our platform because that's part of our business, right? That's what customers, that's what they buy support contracts and premium plans. It will be very hard for anybody to enforce the same level of SLA with an internal team unless it's like fully staffed and very large. What do you think about this? Is this something that also Do you factor this in your calculation, or is that like not a big concern to you?
Specifically, the SLAs for support and
SLA
the yeah,
support, availability. I mean, this whole aspect of, one thing is building a platform, and
yeah,
then they're keeping it running and keeping it available and well performant.
yeah. No, I mean, I don't think we we I don't think we specifically looked at like, the SLAs for support. Like, does this meet our criteria, right? We're a startup. We're relatively small. We understand the challenges of running a platform. But, the tipping point really for us in choosing to move off of our built solution was like the amount of time that our team, and we didn't have a dedicated platform team at the time, so it was just a senior engineer who would be distracted, right? We might have an engineer who their cluster was down, their dev environment wasn't working, and so we would take a senior engineer who understood the infrastructure. They would jump in and hop on a Zoom and help them. And the amount of time, so like now we're down 2 engineers that were trying to troubleshoot that problem, was significant. So I think it's less around, hey, when we have an issue, like, how quickly are you going to be able to help us? But I look at the just the overall system uptime is the biggest kind of factor there. And I think that, yeah, obviously there's a lot of things that go into that, but like having a good and responsive support or like an SLA to like know that we're not like their entire team is not down for an entire day is a key factor in that.
Yeah, that last scenario is when it was one of the things that made me really change my framework around build versus buy. Was like, there's this time when things break, and then you're like, my team is stuck. Like, it happens with cloud providers, it happens with other tools. So having somebody you can kind of go for and say, hey, we need this solved,
Yeah,
and have the expertise and make sure it's going to be there when you need it. That for me is like, one less thing to worry about as a leader of an organization, which is very valuable on its own.
yeah. I think we had our previous solution, just the architecture is drastically different than what we had built versus what we bought with Octeto. And, everybody had their own cluster. So it was a distributed system, in the way that it was set up was, a higher likelihood for sure that like one engineer could be down at any given time, but it would have been pretty unexpected if the entire engineering org was down. Okay. So now like we've kind of shifted to like, it's unlikely that one engineer is going to be down because we're running on shared infrastructure. We all have like one shared thing. So like, a consideration, obviously did come into play, that SLA and that support, because now if there's a problem, it's not going to affect, 1 out of 20 engineers. It's going to affect potentially 20 out of 20 engineers. And how's that going to play out? And what, again, kind of going back to earlier, like what escape hatches do we have? What do we have to put in place to make sure that, we have a path to continue to operate there. I mean, luckily it hasn't been a problem at all, but like, it's still something to consider when you're choosing to, buy versus build. You're now dependent on that uptime from the provider.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that is something that we hear a lot. I mean,
no, of course.
You said cloud environments, and it's part of why I love them. It becomes, if you're doing it right, it becomes this enabler, but also the more successful you are, the more people depend on that. So for me, it's always one of those things I tell everybody I talk to is like, hey, do take this into consideration. Like, if you have a platform and it goes down, if there's a bad upgrade, if suddenly it starts to run slow, having someone to help you, having something you can reach out is very important, because kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, I was, hey, this engineering happiness, it's key, right? For any successful platform. Is that for me is the biggest evaluation is, does this make my day easier? Even if it's slightly easier, that's great. Or is this making my day hard? Because I don't know if you ever faced this, but at previous companies I work at, I've seen people quit because their dev environments are just not good. And then it's like, it's a hard job. And then you have all this friction. And then people feel like they just don't have any ability to like push code, and it's all slow. And people would just quit for this.
Yeah. I mean, I think, one of the biggest reasons that developers burn out and get frustrated is like they're just not effective. And like if the tools are getting in their way, or honestly, like really the tools just aren't enabling them to do it, and I think we look at one of the things that, like to we'd like to measure more. It's kind of hard to measure, really. I'm kind of curious if Octeto might be able to help out a little bit here. But like that inner loop, the time between like saving versus like I see my feedback, because I honestly think that like that's what makes a developer really, really. I mean, I write code, and that's what makes me happy is when I'm like I save the code and I see the thing running, and I feel like I can just, there's nothing stopping me from writing code. Nothing stopping me from getting confidence in it. When you're saving it and then waiting, 1 or 2 minutes for some build to happen and things to take place, then it becomes frustrating, and then you get distracted and productivity just just drops way down, and then your interest in solving the problem starts to drop down. It just becomes like it just starts spinning.
Yeah, no, that last thing you mentioned, it's so hard to measure, especially at the organization. But I've seen that go really bad when that feedback time gets too long. Like the interest, the excitement just dies. Like people will be like, okay, I'm writing some code, send the build. Okay. Like I work at places with like 30 minutes. All right, I'm going to go get coffee, chat with somebody, and then you forget. And then you're doing something else. Oh, yeah, that build. What happened? Oh, it failed. Oh, okay, tomorrow.
Then you have to
That's
like
actually
load all the
something that,
context. Yeah, it's
yeah, no, of
bad.
course. No, that is something that is an area we're going to be focusing more on this year, which is, as and kind of going back to this, we benefit from all of our customers sharing their pain points. One of the topics of conversation now, as they adopt our platform for cloud dev environments, is, there's the benefit to the individual, right? Can they deploy an environment in one click, be effective? Then is, okay, as an organization, how do I measure this? And this topic of how can we measure this feedback loop, like the inner loop, how long it takes, is something we're going to start building a lot of, like, I don't know how it's going to look at the end, but like dashboards or metrics so that platform teams can start using that to evaluate where they need to invest more on. Is you like somebody else, I think it was from Launch Directly, mentioned that for them was very important. Hey, how long does it take to run the environment? Because if I look at that today and I look at that in a month and it's slower, that points to a problem in my organization. Are we making environments more complex? Is the cognitive load going up? Is there something in our build that somebody added a dependency that's slowing things down too much? For me, was one of those things that, as we hear from multiple customers, like, oh, great, now we can build something that we know a lot of companies need, and our assumption is that if 10, 15 customers are asking about this, it's probably beneficial for everybody else. So that is something that's coming, which I'm very excited to start talking more about a way to measure all this developer happiness.
Yeah, we would love to see that, honestly. Like I think that's curious how that plays out. But one of the things that we actually do task our platform team with is put KPIs in place to show that you're making the developers' lives easier. And like I mentioned before, like it is certainly subjective, right? Happiness, you're not going to put a score on that. That's reliable, but there's probably metrics around how a new developer, how long does it take them to click a button, spin up an environment in Octeto and have a fully working environment? Like how long does Octeto uptake? How long does saving code before it's running in the browser take? And all these are different key metrics. And I think it's both important to minimize them and also to be able to kind of catch the degradation that starts to happen early in the process. On PR, even I make a PR change. And to your point, I added a dependency and I had no idea that this is going to impact new developer onboarding time, but it may.
Oh yeah, no, that and it's something else we've been thinking a lot about, and I love that you brought it up. Is this impact, and it's very hard to measure today, of all these decisions we make every day, because it's always sure, sometimes you have this world where I add a dependency and I realize, hey, it takes 10 more minutes, but more likely is this small thing here, small thing there.
Yeah.
But once you see it over a month or 2 months, it's hey, every minute you add to the build time impacts everybody. And that impact is something that is a lot easier to measure when you go from local environments to a centralized platform, deploying cloud dev environments. So that's one of the areas that I'm very excited that we are in a really good position to start doing more with. And you brought this up in one of our conversations, how we are in a really good position to start kind of sharing more intelligence around all these numbers. I agree, you can measure happiness, and there's a very important aspect of it that is just feelings of like, hey, is this aligned with the way I'm expecting things to work? But in my experience, I've never met a developer who will complain, hey, the build's faster. Why?
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, we have 5 minutes. I wanted to like leave this for any Q&A. Thanks so much. But I really hope this was useful for everybody. Definitely the topic of maintenance, ROI, how you keep your company focused is something that, as a founder, resonates a lot with me, and I hope it resonates a lot with our audience, because this matters, in my opinion, at every level. Like, your team has a charter. In bigger companies, your organization has a charter. Your entire company has a mission. Anything you do that is not contributing directly is something you have to rethink. And I believe this applies, at least in my experience, at all levels. I think John P. from our team always puts this as saying, and I like this metaphor of, hey, building a platform is like adopting a puppy. Like, it's fun at the beginning, sure, the puppy is cute, whatever. But then there's all this work. Like, you have to feed the puppy, you have to take it to the bed, you have to go out for walks every day. And that's the part that people don't really consider. Before we go to the questions, Mark, I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to like add here.
No, I mean, I think that's a good analogy I never really thought about before, but I think it is very very apt.
I can see John smiling already. So just going. This is one question, and please, audience, if you have any other questions, drop them there. If not, you can always see us on Twitter. But it says, Mark, did anybody in your engineering team express displeasure with managing your in-house platform instead of having time to innovate and contribute to your company's mission?
I mean, I think it's a good question. I don't know. I don't really think that the core team didn't like it, because we were solving technical problems, and that's what an engineer likes to do, right? Give me a challenge and like let me solve it, and let me be able to like measure that I'm being successful. I feel like the twist though on that is, I think that the displeasure that they have wasn't the fact they had to go do it, but it was that we didn't really want to carve out the time to do it like super well. And so an engineer who was going to go fix something, like upgrade or switch us from this distribution of Kubernetes to that distribution of Kubernetes, or go write a quick script to keep Docker from filling up the disk, was always that. It was like, write a quick script to do this. It wasn't like, go invest like 2 or 3 weeks of engineering effort into doing this really, really well, with all of the test frameworks and all of the confidence that you have that this is going to scale out to be like 100 engineers. It was like more the frustration around, I mean, maybe it's not quite this extreme, but like a good way to think about it was, the engineering time on that was really patching technical debt with different technical debt. And that's frustrating to an engineer to be able to go do that.
Yeah, and once that adds up, it's like, oh, again, this is broken again. I have to go and patch the patch and figure out this special case. That's really good.
Yeah,
putting it. And kind of like to ask I have the thought of the other side of the coin, which is, as you move to like, hey, this platform that you bought from us, were there anybody that said, hey, push back on like, no, we should stay, we should keep building this? Did you ever got that feedback from anybody?
I think that there's like a couple of, like, yes, for sure. We had a couple of different groups. Like, first, like, a lot of the newer engineers that were coming into Replicated were like, this system's great. Like, we really like this. I don't know why you like this other system, but it was, I think it was more just the muscle memory, if you will. Like, I know how this system works. I am good and I am effective in this system. What do you mean we're going to like get rid of this and I have to go learn something new? All of them, though, like maybe they had a weird, edge case or a specific scenario that they actually, they were the interesting kind of side effect of this ad hoc Snowflake environments that everybody had is it was ad hoc in Snowflake. And so people were doing pretty unexpected and unknown. We didn't have a lot of visibility into like how they were using it. And so, like finding those scenarios, there was a long tail of finding those and getting them successful. I mean, I think that we just positioned it as like, yes, but look at the benefits you get from this. Look how much faster this is going to be. Look, like now, like you don't have to worry about whether the front end or the back end or build kit caching. This all just happens magically for you.
No, I love hearing that, because that is our goal with Octeto. Is we don't want developers to worry about that thing. We want developers to be effective, to focus on the company's mission, and just be good at it, and be happy, and hopefully we are part of kind of raising that happiness score at your company. I could go on this for hours, but sadly we are out of time. But Mark, thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed the conversation. I believe our audience will enjoy this as well. And everybody watching, thank you so much for joining us. If you are in this journey of trying to decide whether you should build or buy your cloud dev environment, we have a website. We have a self-evaluation page that will give you some information on all these things to consider. And if we can help, octeta.com, and we'll be there for you. Once again, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and looking forward to see you in our next webinar. Bye.